Hey guys, Top Tier Gaming here, coming at you with a discussion video today on a topic that a lot of players end up asking for any card game they're going into, and that is this sort of looming obligation that hangs over people's heads when they're going to events or maybe just playing for fun. How important it is that they actually play meta, and are they not playing correctly if they don't play meta? And today I will be just going over this topic and my thoughts on it. So before I get into the whole body of the discussion and all the real big topic points I want to talk about, the first thing I want to kind of go over is sort of my history as a card game player, because I feel like that will give a good sort of like my side of view when going into a topic like this. So personally for me, my card game history mostly comes from the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you don't really know how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or really much about it at all, just bear with me for a second because it should all click as I go through the video. So I played Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively since like 2008, really getting into it 2012. I have like 5 regional top 8s, like 2 regional top 16s, been to Nats several times, have like 10 to 15 Nats invites. So I'm a pretty experienced player when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! I would like to think. Now I'm not saying this to brag or anything, but I just want to bring up the point that I have a lot of experience with card games, and this topic is one that exists in all card games, not just Weiss Schwarz, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially, because I'm going to compare the two games here, and I'm going to make the statement that Yu-Gi-Oh! As a metagame is far more oppressive than Weiss Schwarz. So what do I mean by this? I mean to say that when you're asking someone should they play meta, in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you're going to a competitive event, there's more reason to say yes, because their card design is very different from Weiss Schwarz, where Weiss Schwarz has a pretty balanced overall game state. Yu-Gi-Oh! Tends to be on a very not balanced side of things, where things can be very oppressive in the sense that the power level between Tier 2 and Tier 1 in Weiss Schwarz may look something like this, but the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2 in Yu-Gi-Oh! The power levels may be something like this, is kind of what I'm trying to get apart. So knowing that will help me explain this next part a lot better. Getting to this next part instantly is the fact that even in Yu-Gi-Oh! I am a player who has gone to most of these events and have topped with Tier 2 decks. It's just the way I like to play. I don't necessarily like to always be playing what everyone is expecting, because it makes you know, your matchups a little easier, and I just tend to enjoy the Tier 2 decks more. They're just decks I find enjoyable. And now it's time to translate this more into the Weiss Schwarz side of things. So in the same way for Weiss Schwarz as Yu-Gi-Oh!, I tend to like to play the things that I want to play, like my favorite decks. I really enjoy playing No Game No Life, I really enjoy ReZero, you know, things like Prisma Elia are cool, I really like Steins Gate, and these are decks that would be seen more as Tier 2-ish decks. They're not your Bang Dream, your Love Life Sunshine, your AOT, your Konosuba. I'm sure there's a few other decks people would consider to be Tier 1, but those are the 4 big names that come to mind instantly. And all the time new players I hear that are coming into Weiss, they'll ask things like, if I'm going to play at my locals or I'm going to an event, do I have to play things like Love Life Sunshine or Bang Dream? And my answer is always no. So like I said earlier, in Yu-Gi-Oh! There may be more reason to say yes, because the power level between Tier 1 and Tier 2, the gap is just so much larger. But here's the reason in Weiss Schwarz I think you can play whatever you want and still have a great chance of winning, and that is simply how powerful the Climax card is. So I'm going to give some examples here, just explaining just how powerful a Climax is and why it makes the tier gaps so much less in Weiss Schwarz than it does in Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's take an example of my No Game No Life deck, because it is the deck I am currently the most familiar with, that is sort of meta-relevant in English and Japanese, but both players have the cards. So I'm going to take my level 3 Steph as an example. She is arguably the most powerful card in my deck. Now, say Bushiroad walks up to me, the creators of Weiss Schwarz. They look at me and they say, alright, you can take those 4 of your most powerful cards out of the deck, and you have to play 4 plus 2 Soul Climax, which is arguably the worst Climax. Maybe I can say Bag, the old Bag trigger, because it was also kind of bad. But they say you can play 4 of the worst Climax over the most powerful character in your deck. Will you do it? And you can play 12 Climax at your next event. My answer every time is going to be yes. Now let's take a look at this from less of a power standpoint and instead a consistency standpoint. Say we take a Riki. I'll use the one from Steins Gate, the Mayuri Riki. So this is a card in Weiss seen as one of the most consistent cards. Every deck wants a Riki. They're usually always $20 to $25 in a set because they are just that powerful. You're running 4. Same scenario, if Bushiroad comes up to me and says, you can take out these Rikis, you can play 4 Climaxes over them, would you? Every time my answer is yes, because the Climax card is just that powerful. And when Climax cards are this powerful, the reason the tier difference, I feel the gap is less, is because even the worst deck in Weiss is allowed to run 8 of a card that is much stronger than any single character card from any set. And when you have cards like this, it's always going to make the tier difference less of a gap, because you don't have such divisive effects like you do in Yu-Gi-Oh! That really set apart the tier 1 and the tier 2 while you're spending $400 for a tier 1 deck and $100 for a tier 2 deck, is because the effects really do set that gap, while in Weiss, the Climax card reigns supreme. I mean, take it a step further, if Bushiroad looked at me and said, you can run 16 Climaxes, but the other 34 cards in your deck have to be vanillas, I would do it. It's just that simple. Like, I almost don't even have to think about it, because having that many Climaxes is ridiculous. So that might be a bit of an extreme example, but it brings the point across that the Climax reigns supreme in power over everything else in your deck. There's no character single-handedly better than a Climax card. That's just how it is. So that really gives the, it pushes my point that the tier gaps are different, right? Tier 2's here, Tier 1's here. What Tier 1 has over Tier 2 is maybe there are effects that are overall stronger at removing your opponent's Climaxes, like better game ender effects, maybe more consistency cards that help you pay out dirty stock, maybe they, mill your deck more like Akatsuki effects. Tier 1 has better ways to help your Climaxes. But because the Climax, reigns supreme in power, a Tier 3 deck with, just better compression, better cancels, can beat a Tier 1 deck easily. It's not going to happen most of the time, obviously, that's why there are tiers, but the power of the Climax keeps things from getting too imbalanced, if you get what I'm saying. So now that we've established that the tiers there's not that big of a gap between the tiers, the question still stands, should you, if you're going to a top tier event, should you play your Bang Dream, your Love Live Sunshine, whatever is Tier 1 at the time, over the deck you're most comfortable with? And that's mostly up to you, but my answer again is still, you should not feel pressured to. You should not be oppressed by the meta you're in to feel forced to play a certain deck, even going to the highest tier event. And there's a couple of other reasons that fall in line with this idea. One of those reasons is actually sort of an element that exists in Yu-Gi-Oh! To refer back to that, and that is surprise factor. So I'm going to a big event, right, and I decide to play No Game No Life over, let's say I have AOT. I know No Game No Life better, I know the intricacies, the nuances of the deck, what I really want to do it, my game plan, and that puts me ahead over AOT in the sense that I'm more comfortable with it. Playing what you're comfortable with is one of the most important advices I can give to a card game player, because it really makes you feel better when you're at, table rounds and things like that. So there's also an important idea of your opponent having to know pretty much when there's a metagame, the sets they really have to sit down and focus on and know their matchup is the sets that fall in line with the Tier 1 meta. Tier 2, your opponent will have a grasp normally, but may not fully understand everything, and surprise factor can actually take you pretty far in events if you're playing cards your opponent doesn't know how to respond to. It's a big deal. It's always existed in Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe less so now, just because of how crazy that game is currently, but in Weiss it still exists because set knowledge is an important part of being a good player, and if they don't have that set knowledge, they're kind of playing in the dark, if you know what I'm saying. So all of that was more for high-level Weiss and stuff like that, but for the casual level, my answer is 100% definitely no, you shouldn't be feeling oppressed by meta and have this obligation almost to yourself to play meta, because especially at the local level and with friends, it doesn't matter at all. You shouldn't feel forced to buy a very expensive Bang Dream deck because that's what the best deck is. There are always players in any card game that will sort of gravitate to meta strategies, and that's completely fine. If you enjoy playing meta because you like to win as much as possible, That's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't feel like people should feel oppressed for playing the lesser decks. Like, I have a friend who really wants to play Disgaea, and he feels sort of like he doesn't want to build the deck because it's not most meta relevant. And I think that's really sad to have that sort of mindset that the deck is terrible, so he's not even like getting into the game because of that. And it's unfortunate, but that's why this discussion topic I feel is really good, because so many people don't start playing a game due to feeling like meta oppressed. And I just wanted to make a video sort of saying that you shouldn't feel oppressed by the meta you're in. You should just play what you want, and especially in Weiss, where I feel like tier gaps are almost irrelevant. Not actually irrelevant, but they're not as, you know, oppressive as, say, Yu-Gi-Oh! That I keep referring to because it's a card game that I have a lot of experience with. So yeah, that was it for this discussion. I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like if you did. Share the video. I do upload Weiss videos like every other day, so feel free to check out more content if you are into Weiss Schwarz. You can check my channel for all the content I have uploaded currently. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. This was Top Tier Gaming by YouTube.